The Holy Gospel is written in the 18th chapter of St. Luke, beginning at the first verse. Then Jesus told them a parable about the need to pray always and not to lose heart. He said, in a certain city there was a judge who neither feared God nor had respect for people. In that city there was a widow who kept coming to him and saying, "Grant me justice against my opponent." For a while he refused, but later he said to himself, "Though I have no fear of God and no respect for anyone, yet because this widow keeps bothering me, I will grant her justice so that she will not wear me out by her continually coming." And the Lord said, "Listen to what the unjust judge says. And will not God grant justice to his chosen ones who cry to him day and night? Will he delay long in helping them? I tell you, he will quickly grant justice to them. And yet, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on earth?" Here ends the gospel for the day. Please be seated. I know that you are very tired of the whole election process and the debates and everything that is going on, so you really don't want to talk about much. But I got to point to something that happened in the last debate that really is significant because it is a very redemptive moment. As crazy as all this has been, as much as each of the opponents has showered the other one with insults and descriptions of their behavior as abominable, something good came out of the last debate, and maybe it is something we should learn to practice even when we are talking about people in church circles. The debate was just about over last time, and there was a call for one more question. And the question came in the form of a man in a red sweater, who I guess is now a social media icon. But he got up and he said, as he looked at each of the candidates, he said, "Can each one of you tell me one good thing about the other that you deeply respect?" Isn't that a good way to end every conversation that we have about people, whether it's in one of our church gatherings or one of our social meetings on the street during the week? Okay, you've said some negatives. Now, let's think of one deep thing that we really respect about that person. And the reality is, we can always do that. Hillary looked at Donald and said, "What I really deeply respect about him is his family. Look at that family, how supportive it is, how well it seems to be bonded, no sign of trouble. You can't say something is totally bad if he has that close a family." That's paraphrasing the words, but that's what I got out of it. And then Donald turns to Hillary and said, "One of the things that I think I really respect about her is her persistence. She has gone through the mill many, many times, but she keeps on. She keeps on hanging, coming back. And it looks like it's quite possible that she might ascend to one of the highest offices in the land." No, those aren't Trump's words, those are mine. But it ties in with our lesson today, doesn't it? One of the things I deeply respect about anybody, no matter how much I dislike them, I can triumph in the fact that they are persistent in gaining a goal that is really worthwhile, that is important. Many times, a few times I've come to you on Sunday morning and said, "This text I really don't like to deal with because it's difficult." This is the one text I look forward to every 3 years because it is something I believe so wholeheartedly in, is the nature of persistence. of grabbing onto something and going with it and seeing it through, even though you go through times of discouragement. In our gospel text today, Jesus tells a parable. In order to understand it a little better, maybe we might give you a little background on the justice system in Israel in Jesus' day. When we talk about the judge, we aren't talking about somebody in a black robe with a gavel sitting behind some kind of desk and pronouncing judgment. Generally, the trials for people who were Jews did not take place either before a judge or a jury. Usually it was a tribunal of their own people, one for the defense, one for the one that was challenging, and one that was supposed to be neutral. But in small cases, those small cases were decided by a local magistrate that was picked by Rome, but was one of their own people. Now, the interesting thing about those is that they were known to be exceedingly corrupt. Whenever somebody from one culture gets kind of mandated by another to deal with their people, usually a lot of corruption happens. And if you didn't know that person personally, that magistrate, and if you didn't have a lot of money to grease his pocket, as the widow says in the text this morning, you weren't going to get justice. And so Jesus says this woman continually badgers him until he gives up and saying, I just can't take it anymore. I'm going to give him what he wants. It kind of sounds like me when I'm dealing with a car salesman. Finally, they get so sick of me, they kind of give me what I want. We like stories about staying power, don't we? And because staying power gives us the heroes in history. They're the ones that go for some kind of realistic, important goal, and they just stick with it through thick and thin. They just won't give up. Wilbur Wright, December 7th, 1903. He overcame the resistance to flying and flew 110 yards in an airplane for the first time. Francis Chichester sailed around the world in a little boat called the Gypsy Moth, saying, well, really, somebody in a boat small as really that's a problem on a big lake, if the wind comes up, can make it across the ocean, piloted by one man. And he did it. Cicely Saunders came to a medical world and talked about dignity in dying. There's got to be a point, she said, where you medical people have got to just let the person die in a very painless and dignified way. And the medical world fought against Cicely until she finally convinced the world of the concept of hospice. Admiral Byrd challenged the frigid winter of Antarctica and lived through it a whole year. They said it couldn't be done. Edmund Hillary climbed Mount Everest, and now climbing Mount Everest seems to be just an assumption that it'll be successful, where at one time it was said it was impossible, as was Roger Bannister's 4-minute mile. Now every college track meet practically in America has the mile run in less than 4 minutes. And what about spiritual heroes? We have Abraham, the father of 3 major religions, who is called to an impossible task and told by God that he is going to be the father of monotheism, of the belief of one God. And he is going to take him and give him a land and a promise and a covenant. And he is going to be the father of a great nation. And he believes him and goes to a place he does not know, trying to do a task he does not understand, just in total faith. And Abraham is really the father of our religion. We all cheer David over Goliath. Paul, all the things that he overcame to proclaim and make Christianity a major religion in all the world. Martin Luther and Teresa Avila, the one who said that women should have a place in the church In a totally male-dominated church, she said women can be great spiritual leaders, and proved it. How would you define persistence today? There are many ways that it has been defined, but I like the one that came from an old country pastor. He says persistence is taking hold, holding on tight, never giving up. So if you want to go away from church this morning with something meaningful in terms of something that God has given you to do, remember these three messages. Grab hold, hang on tight, don't give up. That's what the woman did. She was a woman, she had a cause. There was no reason that she was going to get justice, but she held on because it was worthwhile. There's a story of a boy in Boston who wanted a job with a financial organization, a job that he had longed to get through his high school and college years. He wrote a letter asking for an interview for the job, and nothing came of it. He waited 2 weeks, said, well, maybe they lost the letter, so he wrote another letter. No response. Again, he wrote another letter. Again, no response. Finally, he went to the post office where he mailed these letters, and he asked who was the owner of Box 468. They said, well, we can't give you that information. That's private information. That's confidential. So what this young boy did was sat in a lobby all day. And he came back the next day and sat in the lobby until he saw somebody open the box. Then he watched him get into the car and followed him to his place of business. Walked in, told his secretary that he'd like an interview with the president, and he got it. And when he met with the president, he says, what's the matter? You offered a job. You didn't answer my letter. And he told him the days that he'd written the letter. And he says, as a matter of fact, I think the letter's on the desk in that pile. He said, I then sent another one and another one. And finally, I just sat there till I saw you come in and get the mail, and then I followed you here because I want to tell you how good I would be for that job. His name was Roger Rabson, a man that Wall Street called the best financial analyst in the history of investing. He took hold. Hang on tight. Just because we ask for something doesn't mean that we're going to get it right away. We already found that out with the children. And children, listen very closely. What you ask for right at first, you might not get. And depending upon how important it is in your life and how significant and how right it is, well, it might take a little while to get. The temptation that we all have in seeking something that is important to us, we have a tendency to give up too soon. We just have a tendency to give up, and to those people who give up, nothing ever comes. Probably, as far as a group of people who really have to be tenacious to get what they want, are authors of books. Because getting a book published is really difficult. Now, it's a lot easier in today's world where you can self-publish. But M. Scott Peck, who wrote The Road Less Traveled, told about his encounter trying to publish his book that he thought was so good and so necessary for people. I heard him speak at one of the Methodist churches in Austin. And he said he worked trying to get it published and went to a number of publishers, and finally somebody agreed to publish a few copies. When it was published, the New York Times and the Washington Post both went on strike, so nobody reviewed his book. It was not known. As he went around and pushed the book himself, finally they sold the minimal amount of copies that they had. He went back to the publisher and asked if he'd publish some more. Said, no, we're so glad we got rid of the books that we did. We're not going to give you another one. He went to a number of other publishers until somebody did it again, and the rest is history. Jules Verne is another author, the pioneer of science fiction. He went to 14 publishers before he got his book published. The 15th one said he took it home and read it, and he read it for 2 weeks. He came back to Jules Verne and he said, you know what, we'll publish it, but this is the stipulation that you have. If we publish this book, we will have the opportunity to publish every other book that you write in the next 15 years. And he agreed to it, and that became one of the richest publishers in the history of publishing. People who need something very badly and believe in it, and it's right, they hang on tight. How many times have you been willing to let something go that was important that you really should have kept with? I would never have been here if I gave up totally. How about jobs that seem almost impossible to accomplish when you first start them, and you go through many trials and troubles trying to accomplish it, and you give up and find out later that somebody else did the same thing, got through it, probably with less talent than you have, and accomplished something you wished you had? How about marriages that suffer trauma, and we're willing to give them up when just hanging on a little longer might solve the problem? How about when we get depressed about things in our life and we just want to give up, to hang on just a little longer until the problem passes? Can you make it through? Hang on tight. And finally, we never let go. Never let go if the project is worthwhile and the goal is important. That's what Jesus talked about. In our 3 lessons today, the first Old Testament lesson deals with Jacob wrestling with an angel. And the angel says, let me go. And Jacob says, I won't go until you give me a blessing from God. And he gets it. Timothy is discouraged in his ministry because people are not being as receptive as he feels they should be. And Paul tells him, hang on tight. Don't let go. In our gospel lesson, the woman wants a piece of justice, and she hangs on and doesn't let go. And then Jesus makes a comment about prayer. And if it's any place that we're willing to give up in Christianity, it's on prayer. We don't see the results too soon, we're willing to give it up and say God doesn't care. And Jesus makes a point. If an unrighteous judge who cares not for God or people at all and is corrupt is willing to grant a wish if you stay with it, doesn't it stand the reason that if you stick with God, if you grab on, you hold on tight, and you never let go, don't you think God is much more gracious than an unrighteous judge? So that's your message this morning. Persistence. One of the most important things. As a matter of fact, some coaches say that the whole attribute of persistence is much more valuable than raw talent. So if you have some goal today and it's worthwhile, grab on, hold on tight. Don't let go. Amen.